Good evening guys, I'm Chris and welcome back to another episode of Rift Amps. Silver plate Vibro Champ is up and running on the bench. That is our output sine wave, and as you remember from Sunday's video, it had an issue where if you turned the treble control up, the output would drop. So the treble control worked like a reverse master volume. And as I turn it now, you can see treble on 10, our volume has not dropped, on which the tone stack is now working as intended. So usually, and I'd forgotten this one, I had to go back and look it up. The issue is, when that happens, is the treble cap in the tone stack, the 250 picofarad capacitor that sits in the tone stack, which is this one here. And here it is on the tone stack itself. When that fails, either it shorts and that causes all your issues. Now, this particular one was leaky, but wasn't completely gone. So I did pop a replacement in, which made an improvement that didn't fully fix it. So continued on with the circuit, and the 15k mid resistor that sits on the bass pot was really interesting. It measured 18k. Here it is. But what would happen is occasionally it would just short, which is really bizarre. Don't think I've ever seen that before. Here it is. So I'm not exactly sure why it was behaving the way it was, but the issue is now fixed, and all we needed was two components, so that's a good thing. So what else have I got left to do on this? Not much really. Unlike the other one, there isn't that high frequency oscillation. Oh yes, there is. There it is. You see that come in? So I've got treble on full, bass on 0, and if I overdrive the amp, you can see it's now oscillating. You see that? So that's a parasitic oscillation. Wasn't doing that a minute ago. So I'm going to go through the usual tricks on these. So first thing to do is to add a screen and a grid stopper to the output valve. And if that doesn't fix it, then we go through and we look at the different places where that could be occurring. But that's the next job on this. Just a weather update for you. It's currently 25 degrees Celsius, which is 77 Fahrenheit. It's gorgeous. It's not too hot, slight breeze, not humid. Lovely. Right, Q&A time. Before we start though, sorry about the sunglasses. It's a beautifully sunny day today. The sun is really high in the sky, really strong, but somebody's parked their car just outside this window here. There it is. And because of the angle of their windscreen, the sun is pointing directly at my face in the reflection, and it's making my eyes water. It's that strong. But I need to have the curtain open to get enough light, so we're going to do this with sunglasses on. So, you know, little treat for you. Anyway, Q&A time. I've got the Vibro Champ on the bench. I'm just adding those resistors, the screen and the grid stoppers. Now, I don't usually use, I don't use carbon comp resistors in my own builds, but I do carry stock for vintage repairs and servicing exactly like this, so I can put an appropriate type in the amplifier should I need to. So that's what I'm doing here. Oh, damn. 2 seconds. Sorry, I just realised I hadn't discharged this amplifier and I was about to stick my fingers in it. So this is my discharge cable. It's got a 1k resistor in series. I've got loads of these that I made up, and I just connected up to the B+ rail. And I always do that whenever I'm working on an amplifier, whether it's switched Doesn't matter how long it's been switched off for, I always make sure I've got a discharge cable on the high voltage rail just in case. It's just one of my little safety procedures that I do. Okay, question. Michael Christie 2212 says, outstanding work. Thank you. Have you considered ultra-linear output for my bass amp? Maybe Dynaco/Sun type iron? I suppose cost versus price prohibitive, but a tight bass response. The design that I've got, or the design that I'm working on, doesn't, or is not ultra-linear, simply because I don't think it needs it. As I mentioned in my last Q&A, bass frequencies are pretty easy to do, and as long as you keep your screen supply stiff enough, and bear in mind this amp will have a choke as well, I don't think going ultra-linear is going to add anything more to the amplifier than what it's already got. So, but maybe I do it, but maybe I try both ways in testing. Well, think about it. Good idea, maybe. But to be honest with you, because of the design I've got, going ultralinear or adding ultralinear on top of that isn't going to make so much of a difference. So I don't think that's the way forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's my grid. So yes, I don't think that's going to be the way forward on that one. But it is something I will continue to consider. So thank you. Henry Hunter, long-time viewer and commenter, thank you Henry, says, thanks for another very informative and entertaining video. Well, you are welcome, Henry. The PR18 sounded marvellous. I liked the dwell control on the reverb. It was definitely worth adding. Yeah, I agree. Especially if, I mean, it depends where you are. If you're a fan of, super surfy reverbs, then maybe it's not for you. But if you want a big spacious reverb that has the depth but not the decay or dwell time, then yeah, it's worth doing, and you can tweak that control to your heart's content, really. What am I doing here? Let's get that wire out. So you could make, see, I tend, the way I do them is I make sure the dwell control shortens the decay time by the dwell time, sorry, by a certain amount, but you can go further. You can make it work further. But I tend to do mine as more of a fine adjustment rather than a total complete control. For those who are technically interested, all it is essentially a reverb drive control. It's a drive in the front end of the reverb circuit. But it just so happens that the way it affects the sound is by, shortening the decay time as you decrease it. So yeah, very interesting. Thanks, Henry. The 1953 5C3 Deluxe. Right, I've gone through it, given it a service. I've tightened down the board, sorted out the filter caps, replaced the two 10K resistors that were in the B plus rail. One of them measures 13K and the other measures 15K, so well outside of the 20% tolerance. The pseudo 250K resistor has been replaced as well, just there. Cleaned all the pots, done all the ground connections again, given it a good going over, removed the death cap, and we're now up and running on the bench. We are pulling 73.5 watts out of the wall at idle. The B plus at the first node, the reservoir cap, is 364 volts. Everything is good, happy with everything. This is our output sine wave. So we'll bring it up to the point of clipping, back it down about there, puts us just under 9 volts RMS into 8 ohms, which will put us just over 10 watts clean, which is about right, to be honest, for these. Tone control works great, and so do all of the other inputs. I'm really happy with this. Rated output, our B plus at the first node sags to 357. Switch it off. So we're dropping 9-10 volts up to rated output. Volts, yeah. Okay. So, lots of confusion on the video about this replacement output transformer. Some of you thought it had been rewired into parallel single-ended, which is not the case because the wire colours from the transformer are different. So, we've got the 2 anode wires which are coloured on the transformer grey and blue. Now the grey goes directly to V3, but the blue one is then taped up and goes into a yellow wire for V4. Red is our centre tap. The secondary, black is common, white is 8 ohms, and the brown wire which you saw wrapped up is the 4 ohm tap on this transformer. Here are the high voltage DC resistances, so across the entire winding 420 ohms, and then red to blue 176, and then red to grey 254. Do you remember this winding is done first, so the same number of turns requires less wire, so the resistance is lower, and this side, the north side, I believe is done second. So for the same number of turns, you now need more wire because it's on top of the existing winding. That's why that winding has a higher resistance. So that's that transformer. We're still trying to identify it. Here's the numbers on it, 1047220. I believe the EIA code is 104, but we're still trying to identify it. I think this is from an organ or similar, but it appears to be the correct spec. It is roughly an 8K primary. Anyway, so that's running great. That's what that transformer is. It is appropriate for the amplifier. And here's the biasing. So remember Ohm's law, V equals IR. So our voltage anode to cathode, 347, and it's the same on both sides, plus or minus 1 volt. The voltage across the cathode resistor is 17.35 volts. The cathode resistor itself measures 247 ohms. Gives us a current through that resistor of 70 milliamps divided by 2 for each valve. Gives us 35 milliamps times that by our anode to cathode voltage gives us a anode plus screen dissipation of 12.18 watts. 6v6 is obviously 12 watts. Gives us 101.55%. And because that includes the screen, we're nice and comfy, and that's great. So we'll just leave this on a soak test for a couple of hours, but I'm absolutely happy with this. It's running great, really happy with it. It sounds great. Josh wants me to put a new speaker cable plug on it to make it longer. So I'm going to do that. We'll put it all back together. And Josh did promise that when he collects it, he'll do some demos for us. Chuck WN says the Fender logo on the Vibro champ, the one I'm working on now, appears to be incorrect. It should have the tail next to the F, the underline. The logo on that amp is from after 73. Yes, I believe you're right, but this is exactly my point. Because I have seen more Fender amps with the wrong badges on than I have ones with the right badges on, but they all appear to be factory. And whatever you look up online, you know, the internet wisdom says this, but I've seen more examples of them being the other way for whatever reason than what they should be. So that's why I don't use the badges to date amplifiers. I always go by transformers, pots, and chassis stamps, because that way you just, you know, that's a more accurate way of doing it. But yeah, I think you're right. So why would it have the later badge on it? Well, maybe A, it's a replacement baffle from Fender for whatever reason, or it's an entire replacement cabinet, or another reason, who knows. But it's just one of those things you see more. For every rule that you find online about dating these amps, I've seen more counter arguments and counter examples than I have of true examples. So who knows? HUS Carl 149, Huscarl 149. Thoughts on the bass amp? Maybe putting a line out on the speaker out. The bass player in our band for a couple of small bar kicks has used my JTM 45 clone that I added a line out to, and that ran to an IR box into the front of house PA plus the cab on stage, and it worked great for the gig. The PA with the sub filled nicely. Do you know what, Carl, if that is your name? I think that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do it. Let's make sure that we add a simple line out to the amplifier. So for those that want to do that, can do so. I think that's a great idea. See, this is why the YouTube comments section is always helpful. Okay, Vibro Champ is done. I've added the screen and grid stoppers to the output valve. It got rid of most of that high frequency oscillation, but there was a tiny bit left. So all I've done is added a small 220 1 kilovolt picofarad cap, 220 picofarad 1 volt cap from anode to ground on the socket. We're adding components there anyway, so it's not an issue. We're now good. So I can button this one up, call it done, call the customer, good news, thumbs up, excellent job. I am getting better at doing these sound samples for you. So with the Vibro Champ all done, just going to run a loop through it, run you through the controls so you can see how it all sounds. Obviously no reverb on this, so apologies. Non-reverb amps always sound a little bit flat on YouTube, but anyway, that's where we are. So we're just going to start the loop off. Currently got the treble and bass, sorry, treble on 4, bass on 8. Probably not the loop to show off tremolo, really. Let's try another. So, great tone, great sound. Again, not the best loop for tremolo, but certainly works. You can see lots of top end available. Bass response, especially for an 8-inch speaker, nice and firm. It's not flubby at all. Stays strong all the way up. Yeah, really happy with this. We'll call this one good. Okay, had a comment from Lollygagger FX, and I believe the guy's name is Sean. So welcome to the channel, Sean. I appreciate you tuning in. He says, when it comes to resistors, unless it's 5 watts, there's no such thing as overkill. Lame. Not sure about that one, Sean, but, you know, tell you what, obviously you've missed the disclaimer that I put below all of my videos, where I say all comments are welcome, but those deemed unhelpful, rude, inappropriate, or unsavoury will be reviewed and possibly censored. Now, as we all know, this isn't a tech channel, it's a workshop diary format thing, but I tell you what, rather than deleting that comment or just censoring it because it is unhelpful, why don't we make it helpful? And let's do some learning together. So as you remember on Sunday's video when I was showing you the Vibro, I commented that the replacement cathode resistors in the preamp section were replaced with 1 watt resistors, and I said that they were overkill. And what I meant by that was that the wattage rating was too large for the application. So we'll rewind a bit and say when it comes to resistors, we're only really focusing on 2 characteristics of a resistor. The first one is its actual resistance rating in ohms, its DC resistance rating. And the second characteristic is its wattage rating. And that is an indication of how much heat that resistor can dissipate before it will burn up. Okay, so let's have a look at the Vibro schematic and let's calculate together what size resistor you would need in that application, and then work out whether that 1 watt resistor is correctly sized, undersized, or oversized. So here is the Vibro schematic, and the particular resistors that we were looking at was this one here. The very first gain stage, it's an RC coupled gain stage. As you can see, there's a resistor on the cathode, which means it's cathode biased. And if I zoom you in there, you can see it's a 1500 ohm resistor bypassed with a 25 microfarad 25 volt capacitor, goes to ground, and Fender say at the cathode there's 1.6 volts. Now, rule of thumb, don't always take Fender's voltages as gospel, check them out yourself, but I know from experience that 1.6 volts is roughly what you would expect to see. So let's do some numbers then. So there are 2 formulas that we need. We need Ohm's law, which, as we know, voltage is current times resistance, and we need Joule's law, which is watts is voltage times current. So we're going to fill those in. So in order to work out the wattage of the resistor, I need to do voltage times current. Well, I don't know what the current is yet. All I know is the voltage and the resistance. So to get the current, I need to do voltage divided by resistance. So our voltage is 1.6 volts divided by 1500 ohms gives us a current of, and this is in amps by the way, that's 1 milliamp. Okay. So our current 0.001 amps, also known as 1 milliamp. We can ignore any numbers after this, they're just inconsequential. They're too small to worry about. Okay, so now we've filled in our current number, we can now work out the wattage rating. So we've got, watts is voltage times current, so 1.6 volts times 0.001 amps means we need, if this would be 1 watt, sorry, 0.5 would be half a watt, so we need 1,000, well, we'll round it up to 2, so 2 thousandths of a watt. That's how much heat is being dissipated. So let's call it 0.002 watts. That's how much heat that resistor is dissipating under normal operation. Are you all with me so far? As a general rule of thumb, in guitar amplifiers, we like to double rate our resistors. So whatever we calculate is the required wattage, we double that. Because the resistor is not only dealing with its own heat, it's dealing with environmental heat as well. There's valves nearby, it's an enclosed space. There's very little ventilation. So we like to double rate our resistors. So times by 2, easy enough, 0.004 watts. That's the size that that resistor needs to be. Okay. So here's the money shot. 1 watt divided by 0.004 means that 1 watt resistor is 250 times larger than it needs to be. 250 times larger. I don't know about you, that's overkill. And just for a bit of fun, there is of course another way to calculate wattage if you don't want to do the Joule's law route. And it's very simple. You can go voltage squared divided by resistance, okay? So we could say 1.6 squared divided by 1500. There you go. Our numbers still add up. So Sean, either I've misinterpreted your comment or you're just trolling me, but the maths is never wrong. Well, that's it then, guys. Thank you very much for watching once again. Please give this video a thumbs up. All your comments and questions down below. Notification bell. Subscribe if you haven't already. Join the channel like these guys have if you're feeling super generous. And I will catch you all at the next one.